What if I told you your retirement number in your head is probably double what you actually need? Not a little off, double. And the reason most people never figure this out is because they're running the math on the wrong spending number, and nobody in the financial industry is rushing to correct them. So today, I'm going to show you exactly how to calculate your real number. And I think by the end of this video, you're going to feel a lot closer to financial freedom than you did 5 or 10 minutes ago. So here's what usually happens. Somebody Googles, how much do I need to retire? They see 2 million, maybe 3, maybe 5, and they feel immediately behind, like the finish line just moved another decade away. So they keep grinding. They keep telling themselves they'll figure it out later, and later becomes 65. But here's the problem with that plan. According to the WHO and the OECD, the average American's healthy life expectancy, the years you actually live in good health, is around 63 to 64 years old. Overall life expectancy is 79. But those last 15 years, a lot of people spend them managing chronic illness, not living freely. So let that sink in. You're being told to work until 65, but statistically, your healthiest years are already behind you by then. You're not retiring in your golden years, you're retiring into declining ones. So the question isn't how much do I need? The real question is how much do I actually need and when do I actually need it? Because those are two completely different problems and most people are solving the wrong one. If you're new here, I'm Justin Saffel, engineer turned investment advisor with over 12 million in client assets. I run financial engineering school and I help high earning STEM professionals build systems that get them to work optional status 10 to 15 years ahead of schedule. Look, I'm not here to hype you up. I'm an engineer. And what I'm about to talk to you about really is just the math. So let's get into it. Let's start with where this sort of ambiguous $2 to $5 million actually comes from, this number, right? So most retirement calculators take your current spending and project it forward. The assumption is that you'll spend in retirement roughly what you spend now. That sounds logical, but it's almost never true. And think about what actually happens inside your current monthly spending. Your mortgage, which if you've been intentional about it, is probably paid off or nearly paid off by the time you decide to make work optional. Childcare, school tuition, kids' activities, mostly gone. Work costs, commuting, parking, work wardrobe, lunches out, gone. And here's the one that people most always forget about: retirement contributions. You stop saving for a retirement once you're actually there. When you strip out the expenses that disappear when you stop working, most people's retirement spending is 30 to 50% lower than they spend today. And so here's what that math does. So say you're currently spending about $8,000 a month. That's $96,000 a year. If you use the 4% rule, which I'll explain in a second, you need about $2.4 million. That's the number that some people are chasing out there, okay? So now let's say that your actual retirement spending is $5,000 a month, $60,000 a year. Same rule. You now need $1.5 million. That's $900,000 less, almost $1 million, just by being honest about what you actually spend. And $5,000 a month in retirement isn't necessarily a sacrifice if you don't have all of those other expenses floating around. And so let me talk to you about the 4% rule and what it actually means. Okay, so what is the 4% rule? Well, it comes from something called the Trinity Study, published in 1998 by 3 finance professors, Cooley, Hubbard, and Walsh. They looked at decades of historical US market data and asked, what's the maximum percentage you can withdraw from a diversified portfolio each year running out of money over a 30-year retirement? Diversified, by the way, means basically invested mostly in stocks and a percentage, maybe probably call it 30%, at the most in bonds. But the success rate was always better when you were mostly invested in stocks. And so the answer that they came up with is 4%. And so you take 4% in a year. So year one, for instance, you adjust for inflation each year after. And historically, your portfolio survives 30 years in roughly 90 to 95% of scenarios, including crashes. Now, here's what most people miss. The 4% rule was built for a 30-year retirement. If you retire at 65, that takes you to 95. That's the math it was designed for. Now, if you're aiming to retire at, say, 50, you need that money to last 45 years, not 30. And the research is clear on this. For a 40 to 45-year retirement, you want to plan on a lower withdrawal rate, potentially, right? And that's what the long horizon simulations from research like early retirement now show. So let's use the 3.5%, which, to be honest with you, is, in my opinion, quite conservative, especially if you don't plan on leaving some kind of legacy. All right, so at 3.5%, let's just do the math on that $5,000 a month in retirement. You actually need 1.7 million, not 2.4 million. Still dramatically less than what most people think, because the spending assumption was actually wrong from the start. And so let me talk to you a little bit of an exercise called the spending audit. And here's the exercise I want you to do maybe this week. Pull up your last 3 months of bank and credit card statements. Go through every expense and sort it into one of 3 buckets. Bucket number 1 would be expenses that disappear in retirement. So this would be things like mortgage payments, if you pay off your house, for instance, childcare, school tuitions, kids' activities, work costs like commuting, parking, work wardrobe, lunches, retirement contributions, because you stop saving once you're there. And then in bucket number 2, put expenses that stay roughly the same. Okay, so that's going to be things like groceries, utilities, insurance, phone subscriptions. Okay. And then in bucket number 3, these are expenses that might actually increase. And so the things like travel. So if you plan to travel more in retirement, or things like healthcare, and this is a big one, because before Medicare kicks in at 65, you're covering your own premiums, and you got a budget for this. It's real, and most people underestimate it. And then add up bucket number 2 and bucket number 3. That's your real retirement spending number. And for most people that I work with, this number is usually 40 to 60% lower than their current spending. And so once you have that number, you just simply multiply by 25. That's the rule of thumb. Because if you're using the 4% rate as a standard for a 30-year retirement, then that's the number you want to use. Now, if you want to be more conservative, you can multiply by 28 or 33 if you're planning a longer horizon. But to be honest with you, I think the 4% rule is a bit conservative anyway. And so that's your actual target. So write that down. I'll bet it's a lot less terrifying than the number you had in your head. By the way, if you want to build the actual system, the accounts, the automation, the investment sequences that get you there, I've got a full breakdown inside Financial Engineering School. Link in the description. It's absolutely free. All right, so now here's where things get a bit interesting. Most people think about retirement as a single event. You work, you save, you hit a number, you stop. But that's not the only way to do this. What if you hit 80% of your number at 50 and you shift to part-time work or consulting that covers your basic expenses? Your portfolio doesn't need to do all the heavy lifting. It just needs to cover the gap. And I call this a bridge strategy. And so you build your portfolio to a point where it covers your essential expenses. Then you do work you actually enjoy on your terms to cover those. And this is what covers those extra expenses. Okay. And so that's not retirement in the traditional sense, but it is work optional. And for most people, that's the goal. You don't actually hate working. You hate being trapped. The bridge strategy gets you out of the trap 10 to 15 years, sometimes earlier, because you're not waiting to hit 100% of a number that's probably inflated to begin with. And so let me put all this together in sort of a real example, okay? So imagine 38-year-old, $150,000 income, currently spending $7,500 a month. Traditional retirement math says that they need 2.25 million. At a standard savings rate, they're looking at 65. Now let's engineer this a little bit differently. So step one, you do the spending audit. Mortgage is paid off, kids are grown, no commuting, real retirement spending, call it $4,500 a month or $54,000 a year. Step number two, you calculate the real target. At 3.5% withdrawal rate, extremely conservative, retirement is 1.54 million. Step number three, this is where you got to map the bridge. At 50, they project 900,000 invested. They shift to consulting 20 hours a week, covering $3,000 a month. The portfolio only needs to cover $1,500 a month. That's $18,000 a year. And if you calculate that at 3.5%, they only need $514,000 to cover the gap. They're already there at 50, okay? All right, so step number four, this is full work optional. So say by 55, the portfolio has grown up to 1.4 million. No consulting required, fully work optional. That's 10 years earlier than the traditional retirement path. Not because they earned more, not because they saved aggressively, but because they did the math correctly. And so here's what I want you to take away from all of this. The retirement number in your head is probably wrong. It's based on spending assumptions that don't hold up and a timeline that doesn't account for what life actually looks like when you decide to stop working. And so the math is simpler than the industry wants you to believe. And so if you actually do the spending audit, you calculate your real number, map your bridge, then you'll know it. And if you want to build the actual system, the accounts, the automations, the investment sequence that gets you there, I've got a full breakdown inside Financial Engineering School. Again, links in the description. It's completely free. And here's why. Because knowing the number is step one, building the machine that hits it is step two. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.